Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everyone. But thank you for zooming in to hear two of my very special guests, Mirai and Zia, talk. The format will be that Mirai, Zia, and I will talk for about half an hour, and then Subbu, my colleague, will join in with Q&A, and then Winnie will close the session towards the end with a few minutes. Um, as we know, the last few decades from 1991 till 2021, for the last 30 years, India has gone through phenomenal change, a phenomenal, completely economic landscape has, you can't even recognize the India from 1991 and the India today in terms of economic growth, GDP, the wealth effect, etc., etc. But we're here to talk about the other things that are required that may keep India future ready for the next 20 years. And those other aspects are the social aspects of India, the gender inequality that still exists in corporate India and in society in India. And what do we as a people, what do we as a country need to change to get ourselves future ready? So it's with that in mind that we invited Zia and Mirai for this session. Very brief sort of background to Mirai and Zia. Their bios have been there for you all to see. But if you look at the overall sort of beneficiaries of the last 3 decades of economic reform and GDP growth rate, Zia would be up there in terms of her law firm. She's built it into a world-class law firm focused on India, doing things, helping multinationals in India, Indian companies in India, growing with joint ventures, and you name it. I mean, she's right up there. If you look at Seva, how Seva was in 1991 and where Seva is today, clearly more focus, more attention, whether from the government or from private sector. And you think of us as a nation. So as a nation, we've had a prime minister who's been a woman, we've had president of India been a woman, chief ministers who've been women. So we've had a lot of women who've ruled many parts of India politically. And before we, sort of jump forward into where we're going to be for the next 20 years, I'd like to ask Zia and Mirai a question, a bit of a flashback. What were you doing prior to the July 1991 economic reforms announcements? What were you busy with? What was your life ambition in 1990 prior to those 1991 reforms? Some reference to context. Maybe we can start with Zia on that, and then with Mirai.
Sure. The truth is, it's a very funny answer. And the funny answer is that, I left India in the late 70s, within 3 months of my telling my mother I wanted to marry my husband. And she said, get the hell out of here and go study law. And she refused to let me come back. Every time I finished my first law degree, she said, now do an LLM. And I said, I've done my LLM. Now then she says, go and work in New York. And finally, I came back when my father told my mother, he's just not going to wait anymore. So when I came back to an India pre-1991. And as a lawyer, there was no foreign direct investment that I could practice my M&A skill sets about, which is what I did in New York with a law firm called Baker and McKenzie. So I came back to the court, and that's it. I got married. I produced 3 daughters. And along the way, every day, I would wear my band and gown and sit in a courtroom with maybe one other woman, 100 men, and talk about your lordship pleases, my lady pleases. And that's what I did till 1991. So the opportunity for me to be what I am today simply did not exist. Everybody had gone out. No multinational could own more than 40%, as you know, Ajit. And there we were just stuck in another dimension. So after 1991 is when I really started my M&A practice, which I do today. Because when Manmohan Singh opened the door, that's when all the guys who had left India came back, and all my colleagues in New York and Baker McKenzie and other firms basically said, let's get back to India. So What I was doing before 1991 was just being a honest, hardworking, paranoid junior counsel in the Bombay High Court.
And now you are an honest senior counsel in the High Court, doing a lot of things still. Okay. Mirai, how about yourself? What were you doing pre the July 1991 announcement?
So, some quite startling similarities with Zia. I returned to India in 1984, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed with my public health degree, and dived headfirst into Seva. Ilaben Bhatt met me and said that we need young women who are ready to hitch up their saris and work, and are you ready? And I said yes. And will you wear khadi? And I said yes, and I was very excited, and pretty much I haven't looked back. But in July 1990, I was a new mother. I was a mother for the first time. Like Zia, I'm a mother of 3 girls, but at the time my firstborn was actually born in July of 1990. And I was still reveling in that, making mistakes and having fun, and busy balancing new motherhood, work, and family, like millions of women in India have done before me and continue to do. Nothing new in that. On the work front, I was keen to use my education. I had the privilege of a good education, and I thought I should use that in the service of the people of our country. And I decided to do public health. I switched out of medicine because I thought that, there's no surfeit of doctors in our country. It's just that they don't go where where they're most needed. And so I chose to do public health. And at the time, late 80s and 90s, before the reforms, I was busy, trudging from village to village and having a wonderful time, enjoying learning Gujarati, learning Garba, learning how to eat spicy lasan ki chutney and so on. And continuing to work with women at the grassroots, really, as best as I could. And as I said, balancing out both my new role and additional role as a mother, in addition to being a spouse and everything else that the women of this country continue to do 24/7.
Yeah, well, more power to you all for what you'll have done. So, clearly 1991 was an absolute watershed moment for you all individually as individuals, and where things are mapped out. And particularly on the social sector side, if you look from 2004, 2005 onwards, you've seen the various rights that have come in, the rights to employment, right to education, etc., that came in under the UPA, etc. And in the 2020s, do we have 2 Indias? Do we have 2 treatment of women? Is there like an urban success in terms of women are able to express themselves at the workspace, at the home space, and in rural India, is the jury still out? What are your comments on that? Zia, do you want to go first?
So I think that, there's a very long way to go for women in this country. And I think the good noises that we hear are good to talk about and to celebrate, but we cannot forget how long the road is still. And I think the starkness of it, most of us who live in urban areas don't realize, because rural India is still old and dark in many ways when it comes to women. I personally believe that this alleviation and upliftment of women who hold up half the sky and therefore have to be an integral part of any development of our nation is only going to come with education and looking after the girl child's health. This can be through various initiatives of the government, of course, but really for institutions like Seva, who are willing to be out there and make sure that women are recognized, firstly, because they're able to put money on the table, right? That's the real game changer. It's all very well to say you want a mindset change, but in rural India, that comes with what you deliver. And so I think that more education will increase the possibility of money on the table by women to be put in numbers. I think the microfinance story will have to still escalate and swirl. I believe that it's not a 5 to 10 year story. It is longer, but I believe the incremental steps, however small, are going to have profound impact, because once you taste freedom in your mind, and once you taste economic entrepreneurship in your mind, then two things happen. You can never go back to what you were, and you will be vested in your girl child more than you ever were before as a woman. And that's, I think, how society will change. In urban India, it is, of course, slightly better. But you always have to ask a Hindu, will you let your daughter marry a Muslim? And you have to ask a Muslim whether he will let his daughter marry a Hindu. And that's where, if there are biases, those have to be addressed. It's very instinctive. And sometimes, you scratch the surface and it's pretty shallow. But I think definitely more steps in the cities. The girl child and the woman, the young woman, is much more in control of her destiny than she was 15 years ago in urban India.
Yeah, I would definitely, thanks Ajit and Zia. I would definitely go with that, taking up from what Zia just said. I think, we've come a long way. There's no doubt we have a long way to go. But I think whether we speak about urban women or rural women, and I don't see those as separate, because many a time, poor urban women in the informal economy, street vendors, waste pickers, domestic workers whom I work with, are actually rural women who are economic refugees. They came to the city because they couldn't make a living. They are not coming to the city because, it's a choice, it's survival. So I see these two very much linked, urban India and rural India in general. But I think back to my own sort of awakening, if I may share, as a 16-year-old in Mumbai, I'm a Mumbaiker essentially. When the Mathura rape case happened, and Zia will remember, that was a aha moment for the women, and I think many men of this country. I mean, we were on the streets, we understood what was happening to women. And when I think back on those days, I certainly think we've made some strides, and there's something to be cheerful about, cheer about, and be happy about. I agree with Zia that the 70s, in particular after the Mexico Women's Conference, there was just a blooming of microfinance. Our own Seva Bank was started in 1974, together with Michaela Walsh, who was a Wall Street banker and threw that up and joined hands with Ilaben Bhatt and started Women's World Banking, and thereby hangs a tale. So there was a lot of that kind of collaboration going on at the time. This is, of course, pre-reforms. Then a couple of other things I'd like to, at macro level, point out. One was another game changer was in 1995, the Beijing conference. And then one that I went to, which for me was a real watershed moment, was the Cairo Conference of 1994, the International Conference on Population and Development, where for the first time ever, rights of women to their body, women and girls, on contraception, abortion, women's health, were discussed. And I'm proud to say India was a signatory. In fact, India led the charge. There were other countries, and you can imagine who they were. I shall not name them here, who really were putting the brakes on. So there we did really well on the global stage, I must say, to defend the rights of women and girls way back in 1995. And then, of course, we had the 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment in 1992. And though everyone was dismissive and scornful and said, oh, women in panchayats, nagar palikas, they're pati sarpanches. In fact, when women started writing checks at the panchayat level, they liked that. They tasted power, they tasted the power of money, and they were quite excited. And then there was, of course, the Vishakha judgment, which you would know very well, Zia. So I think there have been some real milestones. But I think the major issue, as I see it from the grassroots, from the micro level, is that we have, an amazing constitution of India, which promises Indian women and girls equality under the constitution. And we have several laws, but the implementation is spotty at best. And in many times it's non-existent. So I believe what's needed both is to enhance the power and status of women and girls and work for their empowerment is both macro level policy and legal changes, those instruments which create an enabling environment for gender equality and economic empowerment, but also at the micro level. This is our homework. Governments can't do. We have to organize women, build solidarity, build their collectives, so that we can sort of grab hold of those laws and policies and make sure they reach the poorest, the most vulnerable, and the weakest of women and girls. And also, let's not leave men behind. I mean, I think it's important that men are very much part of this dialogue. I mean, it takes two of us to tango and to change the world.
But some of your data points, Mirai, indicate that, as you all in Seva have seen, that when you empower the woman, it tends to change the household and change the economic life within that. So it is the women who seem to be driving the change, at least in rural India and even within poor urban India households. That's what you've seen from your experience.
That's right, absolutely. And we are promoting local women's leadership, and they have been second to none. But I do want to quickly say here, Ajit and Zia, that one thing we have noticed is that sometimes the men are left behind. So I think many of us in the Indian women's movement are thinking we have to proactively reach out to men and boys. Often it's not the fathers, it's the brothers who erect barriers, whether it's in property, whether it's like for higher education. So I agree with Zia, we need education, but I think education in the broad sense, the 3 R's, of course, but also educating all of society so that we begin to change our mindsets, and men and women, everybody.
Right. So, in the next 20 years, as we make India future ready for that unknown future and preparing things, we have to start focusing, as we're reading in the press and seeing, we have to start focusing on things like climate change. And there's a lot of clamor and a lot of focus on doing things that are good for the climate and therefore allowing us as a species to thrive and survive on planet Earth. The planet will survive without us, no matter what the climate is, we may not. So do you all find, and Zia, I'll start with you, do you find that the spending on decarbonization, will that take away the money that's required for education and for uplifting the girl child that you have spoken about and Mira has referred to too?
I don't know the answer to that. Maybe. We only have that much to spend as a government. How we allocate is cutting the pie the way they want to prioritize it. But I would think that we have enough. Hopefully, what are we saying? That we don't, as a country, reduce our dependence on fossil fuels, we're going to lose trillions of dollars as India, right? But if we don't concentrate on the development of the half of our population, we are also going to suffer. And I think that in the decades to come, initiatives for the girl child and the woman will come as much from private sector as from government. Because I think there is a growing awareness across the country that talent is talent and that we cannot afford to lose as a growing economy so much of our talent to other issues. I think there's a report, not sure if it's by the World Bank or some other institution, but it said that about 10 years ago, 40% of our women dropped out of the workplace. It was called our leaky pipeline. India's leaky pipeline is 40%. Now that has to be fixed. There is no question. And so whether it is through government initiatives or private initiatives, I think you will have more of an emphasis in retaining talent and the government will probably be able to allocate a bit more for climate change, as only it can in that sense. So let's see. I think both are imperative. If you don't give health to the girl child, you have the same problem. She cannot thrive. If you don't educate the girl child and only um, I'm a Baha'i by religion, and as a religious edict, our prophet tells us that not only are men and women equal, but if you have food for one, feed the girl because she's the mother of future generations. It's that ingrained in me, okay, because of my, but it's not ingrained in India at all.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times do we see the boy being fed and the girl being malnourished?
Right.
So until that changes, I'm not sure that we have enough money to do everything.
Right. Mirai, what do you think? I mean, really, this is up your alley, seva, funding, trying to do all these things, and then people want to go into fossil fuels or green energy.
So first of all, I think that, poverty and the removal of poverty and survival of our planet are intertwined and inextricably linked. I don't think we can have one without the other. And I'll tell you why I say this. I say this because I believe that the forces that have led us to this stage of precarity vis-a-vis the planet and our very survival are the same forces that are keeping people in poverty. Because wherever there's poverty, there is injustice and exploitation. And the same people who've exploited our earth ruthlessly are also responsible for keeping millions in poverty. I'm sorry to say, but this has been my experience. And of course, women are the worst sufferers because of patriarchy, almost in every country. And certainly South Asia is one of the most patriarchal regions in the world, where there is gender discrimination and discrimination even in the womb, what to speak about education and food later on. So I think that I see these as a continuum. It's not one versus the other. And I believe donors and policymakers have begun to see this link that, if you want to have a green economy, if you want to save this planet, then you also have to start right local, decentralized, and build upwards and
Absolutely.
help people out of poverty. And I also think answers come from local people, whether they're traditional, indigenous, our Adivasi folk, or whether they are First Nations peoples in Canada who live on this earth lightly and understand how to live in a simple, non-consuming manner, or all-consuming manner, rather. I mean, I think we can find answers. And if I may just quickly say one or two examples, one of our signature campaigns we say is Van Vanitaune, hand over the forests and resources to women, feminize our forests, because there's livelihood there, because women understand the green economy long before all the climate discussions in Paris and elsewhere, and because they know that their very survival and their economy is linked to the earth in a way that is not the case for many of us anymore. And just to give you one small example, just about 2 weeks ago, I was in a small tribal village in South Gujarat, and I was so heartened. This is the way forward. These are very poor Adivasi women, and the district forest officer, once they formed their collective, actually gave them some hillocks which had been denuded, deforested rather, and gave them work planting trees. This was about 5 years ago, and we had intervened and helped with the interface. And today there are trees on those hillocks, and they're having better rainfall. It's a small example, but this is how poverty and the environment and our planet's survival are so intertwined. And who knows how to do this better than women? And the other thing that I want to say is that, I really don't believe that we have lack of resources in this country. We have so much talent, so many well-meaning people, and so much wealth, not just with government, but private wealth as well. All of us who are better off people in our society. And government as well. We spend what we want to spend. We have umpteen examples. I'm not going to list them out. But how is it when we come to public health, when we come to early childhood care or education, as Zia mentioned, suddenly our purse strings become tight. So I think, it's not a lack of resources, it's a different priorities. I mean, if we
Right.
prioritize survival of the mass of our citizens who are poor
Mhm.
and who should be central to everything we do, then we won't go wrong.
Correct.
So, yeah, that's great. So Zia, you are a role model for women in urban India, and companies like ours, like Quantum. I'm not keeping Helper NGO out of the equation because Helper NGO is very well staffed and is run by a woman, Winnie, who some of you all have met and will soon see. But Quantum doesn't have a lot of women at senior roles. We are guilty in some sense of being part of the leaky pipe, where you've had people rise or get to a level, then they either get married or they move out and something happens in their social life or home life, and then not quite stayed all the way up to the top. I would like to believe, and Subbu and I have discussed this many times, that it's not lack of opportunity. But what are the things that we as private companies and the government can do to ensure that women can actually fulfill their entire potential right through, as opposed to getting nipped in the bud just as they're about to flower and blossom in corporate India?
You're asking me?
I'm asking you, Zia, yeah?
I think you don't understand women enough. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. I mean, it's obvious, as Indira says, that our body clock and our career clock are clashing, right? It's obvious. As we are becoming good professionals, if we are married, we need to have children before we get too old, okay? And that is the conflict that we have to address. We are Mother Nature's children bearers, but we also have a brain. But given what we need to go through, and in India, the men still do not really have anything near an equal share of upbringing, we give in, we become the leaky pipeline, right? So what can we do better as organizations? We need to understand that there are certain times in a woman's life where she just needs some flexibility and time out. And you cannot hold that against her. I mean, we had a partner in our law firm which said, after these women get married, why do you treat them unequally? I said, because when you finish having a baby, you come and talk to me, I'll treat you unequally too. And so what is unequal? It's nothing. No woman who's a proud professional wants charity. Nobody does, okay? But if instead of 10 assignments a year, you give her 6 or 7 assignments a year for 2 years, 2 things happen. She can survive. And the second thing is she's yours for life, all right? The stickiness, the loyalty normally of a woman employee or a woman professional is huge. So what happens? I think it's lack of conversations. I think probably, Ajit, you would feel awkward if some woman came into you and said, I want to talk to you, I'm pregnant. I'm going to have my child in 6 months. I need these sort of flexible situations. You'll probably be thrown if the first woman walks in. If the second woman talks in, you'll be more prepared. But are you anticipating that? I mean, I have a checklist. When a woman tells me she's getting married, I go through my checklist. I say, take out a piece of paper and write down, this is what will happen. In the first year, you'll be fighting most likely with your mother-in-law. In the first year, you'll be fighting most likely with your husband. It's all going to happen. Deal with it, let it pass. All right, your mother-in-law is your best friend. She's your biggest support. So deal with it, don't fight with her. Then comes the first baby, traumatic. All right, every young woman has gone through trauma as a young mother. And then the workplace comes at you. We have to treat you equally. You have to be on merit. You can't expect any favors. So what do you say? You say, "Theek hai, boss. I've got this kid crying at home. Main ja rahi hu." So where does the organization hold you? Where does it say, we get it? You take your time off. Don't worry. Clients are clients. They come, they go. Aega, jayega. You come back here. You tell me what you need to come back here. That is the conversation we need. And believe me, it's very bespoke. Some women need something on travel time, some need somewhere on timings, some need a crash in the office, some need just a little time off, little brain space. It's so easy, I've come to the conclusion. Because I'm a woman, they can come into the room and talk to me. And they know that my worst time is when I lose a woman. So they've got me where they want me, right? They can ask for most things.
Right. But what can the government do? Can the government come out with policies? Like, for example, in Europe, they have a leave for the male, for the husband to look after the kid, right? So they have things. So what can the government do?
I think that we don't know how much the government is already doing. From what I understand, all women in the civil service at any time of their career can choose 2 years of their own time without having any effect on their job. They can choose it if they're becoming a mother or when the children are having exams or anything. It's very, very commendable, the government policy. Now, if you do that even in your own private institution and you marry what the government is doing, I think it could be incredible. I think the problem is most of us don't know that these schemes have been out there for pretty long, over 10, 15 years. The women in government know about these schemes and they talk about it and they express how they've been able to hold their career at critical times. So we just need to have more awareness, have more broadening of this flexible and listening approach. And I think even if we can keep 2% women more in the pipeline, it's good.
Yeah. I mean, we have had our fair share of women CEOs, women finance company, we've had that, but obviously it's kind of a few examples and then it peters out, by and large. So, are we sort of moving to a world when there is ESG and gender equality coming in? Are we moving to a world of tokenism where you put a tick and you say, that we've done something, we've got people, the ratios are right in terms of number of women and men, but maybe the payouts are very different. Then we talk about the security of the women when they have to work late, if they have late hours, if they work in different towns, if they have to travel on work. How do you see all this cultural clash between the traditional role of a woman, expectation from a household, and then expectation from the workspace? I don't know, Zia, do you want to begin? And then maybe Mirai can throw in a few words, especially on the part of the security in rural India.
I think that, it's getting better. Mm-hmm. And again, I think it goes back to the need for talent, Ajit. People will take care of the women. People will provide security because they would need them to work at night. Yeah. Right? Mm-hmm. And so if they need them to work at night, they'll make sure that they will be agreeable to work at night.
Right.
Their parents will allow them, that their husbands will not have a shit fit, and that they can still be mothers, with this sort of environment. It's all going to boil down to, do you really need the fair agenda? And the answer is an undisputable yes. If we are growing, there's no way we can grow without women in the economy. Just no way. And therefore, you will find infrastructure and solutions to bring them to the workplace and to keep them there. It's my gut.
Mirai, some thoughts on that, on security for women in the workspace and or the working sites, the construction sites?
Sure. So first of all, I just want to remind us that, the mass of women in this country are in the informal economy, and they don't have access to maternity leave or maternity benefits or full-day childcare. So if we are talking about economic empowerment of women, then I think that there's still a long way to go in creating an enabling environment. I mentioned recently the Government of India Labour Ministry has enacted some social security codes, and they asked us for inputs, and they have maternity benefits for the 4% of women who are some of the women that Zia spoke of, who might be in government service or who are covered by the Factories Act. But the mass of women, about 95% or 96%, in fact, don't have access to any of these basic things. And yet they work They're economically active. For them, it's not a choice. Work is survival. Work and livelihood is survival. If they don't work, they can't feed their children. It's as simple as that. So I have seen women who, have a child who's barely 6 weeks old, get up and go back and work in the fields or in the marketplace and take their baby there because there's no full day childcare. In fact, that's one of our signature campaigns, universal childcare. If you want women to join the workforce, the one thing you need to do immediately is have childcare. Our studies show that women's income doubles when she has access to full day childcare, leave alone, reducing her stress, her tension, and giving her peace of mind. So I think, creation of enabling environment, yes, the private sector will do it, but I think it behooves the government, our government, state, and also central government to take the stewardship in this, to take the first step in this and create an enabling environment. It's a shameful situation that we are one of the few countries in the world with a falling female workforce participation. There are many reasons, but one of the reasons is that an enabling environment is not created for them. Let me tell you one more thing. After COVID, a study by the Azim Premji University showed that only 7% of men lost their jobs. 46% of women couldn't go back to work. How can they? If their children are at home, they have more care responsibilities and so on. So you want more equality in the workplace, you want more women in the workplace. As Zia said, you have to be sensitive, you have to be flexible. I think it involves a major change of mindsets of all of us in society, women, men, and so on. And a lot of education way before of men and boys and also of girls, so that they feel they can do so much, they can do as boys can do and as anyone can do. But that environment has to be created, which still doesn't exist in our country. It will take some time, but we are hopeful.
So to get future ready for a country where half the population is women to hold up the sky in some sense, as Zia referred to earlier on, you've got the governments who need to put up creches or put up daycare. You've got the governments who got to spend money on education, and you've got the corporates to be more sensitive to understand the needs of the women for those working in the organized sector. And for those in the unorganized sector, you've got the government giving the support systems in some sense. What should women do to make themselves future ready for the next 20 years? What would you, Zia, starting with you, what would you advise urbanish Indian women to, what should they do to keep themselves ready for the next 20 years of India's future?
This is actually one of the toughest questions for urban middle to upper class young women, because I hope I'm wrong, but I feel that, so there are generations, right? You have my grandmother's generation who never really thought of being professionals. Then you had my mother's generation. Some of them got to being professionals, but the aspirational seed was growing, not much fulfilled. I think my generation had a great boost in that our mothers supported us and our fathers had a little bit of change of mind about us. This generation, I see a couple of trends, and I'd be interested to see what you think, Mirai. I think that our fathers are much more vested in their daughters than they were before. Okay? They're prouder of their girls. They would like to see them become good professionals and use their educational skill sets more than before. So that's one great thing. But I see lesser passion in this generation, where there is already a sense of course I'm equal. What do you mean? And therefore, why do I have to work that much to show that I've achieved equality? I'm equal. Okay, now, if I like it, I'll do it. If I don't like it, I won't do it. So I think that push has to be there for the younger women. I think that we've seen, like I've seen myself in a courtroom with 100 men and 1 woman, okay? I'm not sure that they face that anxiety of inequality, that nervousness and paranoia of I cannot be showed up, right? That shame of not being able to overperform just because you're a woman. I never needed the money, but it was that, nobody can basically hold me down because of who I am. So I think if that passion gets inculcated in all our young women, they will be their own drivers and there will be less parental pushback because there is parental pride today in what our girls are doing. So it's a combination in the urban area. The rural area, very, very different.
Mirai, do you want to talk about the
Sure.
rural India, which is different?
Sure. I think I agree with Zia that, there is parental pride. And I also, both in rural areas, I mean, my experience is more with working class girls, and both in urban and rural areas, I see a certain excitement that I didn't see in their mothers and aunties and grandmothers who are our original members. They're more educated, they're more tech savvy. They're not afraid of the digital world. They're excited to know more, but they're still bound by tradition and societal norms. And they can't do it alone. So one of the things we've been doing is to set up Kishore and Kishori mandals in the rural areas so that girls can come together and support other girls. And the boys too. And they've done some amazing stuff. When one of the girls was being yanked out of school and married off, not only the girls in her Kishori mandal, but the boys in the Kishore mandal of the village rushed off and explained to her parents why this should not be done. She was a smart girl and she should be at least go to college. So there are many little small daily struggles and small victories and setbacks also. But I think what's important is that the mindsets have to change, and also girls and women's mindsets have to change. One of the biggest challenges when we go into a new area in Seva and we ask women, what do? And they say, kuch nahi, we don't do anything. And we're like, hello, you're working 24/7. So our own self-concept is that we are faltu, that we don't do any work, that we're quite useless. And, society reinforces that. All our languages say that women's brain is in her foot, so on and so forth. At least in Gujarati, there is one saying like that. And so I think, we have to start with ourselves. If we don't value ourselves and have a greater sense of self-esteem and self-worth, then who will value us? Neither are men folk, nor will society. So that is the first breakthrough, to understand that, I am a person with rights. I'm a person of value as well, not just my brother or my son or my husband. And the other thing that we keep saying to our girls is be bold, try non-traditional. Every time we don't have to go into jams and jellies and pickles. Try driving, become a carpenter, do things that, and it's tough. It's not easy. We tried very hard to have e-rickshaws and women becoming rickshaw drivers, but take one more generation. So I think, women they understand money very well. That is, they run their household budget on a shoestring, talking about poor women. But control is another matter, because patriarchy is alive and well in our country when it comes to equal rights, land titles, property. I mean, in every home, there's a struggle, virtually. And, the sisters don't want to fight with their brothers, quite frankly. I mean, it becomes really tough. So as I said earlier, often the fathers are proud, but the brothers put the brakes on.
I shall remember that since I have sisters. Okay.
Yeah, we'll check up on you, Ajit.
Check up on me, do that. Sort of moving to a more personal note, what will Zia and Mirai do to keep yourselves future ready for the next 20 years as India builds out and changes, in the future? What will Zia be doing? What skills, what changes do you plan to make yourselves more equipped for that future of India? And it could be politics too. If you want to get into politics, that's also accepted as the answer.
I'll be 85 and hopefully no longer here in 20 years. No. Ajit. So don't wish that much of a longevity cycle on me. No, I think that for me, it's difficult, but to be able to adapt to a frame of mind where I understand the younger generation better, right? And the younger women better. I've grown up in a certain way where all, creatures of our upbringing and habit and years of dedication in a manner that we think has done and works for us. So for me to be future ready, so I'm managing partner of a law firm with 500 lawyers. If I don't understand them, I have a problem, right? And I sometimes really find it difficult. That is where I need to change, and that is the concern where I need to get future ready. Otherwise, I think from a human perspective, the career path or the progress is really to be able to do more than just law, to be able to give back in a meaningful way, to use whatever areas of influence I have to further causes which are dear to me, which certainly include, the progress of women, and to spend more time in making more meaningful societal impact, I think, than I'm doing right now professionally.
Do you see yourself forcing governments, regulators to change rules and to be even more supportive, right from CSR rules to, you already mentioned in the IAS, there's a system, but do you see yourself becoming more of an advocacy role and trying to encourage faster, rapid change?
I do that every opportunity I get. I remember when they had this section that came out that all listed companies had to have one woman director. And there was a lot of why it should be on merit. What is all this? And I used to always tell a lot of the men who used to try and make this argument with me. I used to say that, my law firm makes a lot of money because of the stupid mistakes men make. So if that is the case, then I don't see why every woman has to be a genius and men can be mediocre and sometimes fairly unintelligent. So let's cut this out and let's get on with the plot. So I think that the minute you can drive a message home, I always believe that it's really small incremental steps. I'm like the ant who wants to just make a little bit of a buzz at a time. But of course, I would say at least 5 to 10% of my time is spent today in advocacy in any case, and I would like that to increase.
Great. Mirai, your side, what are you doing to make yourself future ready and Seva too?
Well, I feel like I've been so privileged to work with so many amazing thousands and thousands of women who have so little but have so much insight about life, that really it's my responsibility to enthuse younger women with the kind of passion that Zia spoke of. So I see myself, if it's useful, mentoring younger women and showing them that, one can be a mother, a wife, and also a working person. I feel very sad sometimes, Zia, when I'm in meetings and then young women put their hands up and say that after marriage we can't work because, how can we manage? That our generation never even thought like that, and I'm sorry that people feel that way. But maybe just supporting younger women to follow their dreams, really, but also, you can live a life committed to service and have it be a rich and enjoyable journey. You may not earn too much money, but you earn a lot of other things, and peace of mind and a good night's sleep for sure. I also see myself doing a lot more advocacy because of almost 40 years of working at the grassroots. Sometimes the bureaucrats do listen, and as you've gathered by now, one of the things I feel really strongly about is early childhood care, both for our children and both as a way for women to get back to work, daycare, and other support. I mean, I'm trained as a public health person, so I won't rest till India has universal health care and also some basic social protection. Ajit, you've been working with me on micro insurance. I mean, we saw it in this pandemic. Why are we not seeing the light of day on these kinds of issues? So there's a lot more to do. I think also engaging with men in a sensitive manner. As I told you, many of us in the women's movement feel like, we were so busy with women and girls, we forgot about boys and men. And I think there's some catching up to do there. And because of our work on the ground, I was surprised how open boys and men are. They were like, you talk to our sisters all the time. What about us? Try us. And then finally, I like to write. So I think there have been so many amazing stories. So document and share what works. Everyone wants to know, you invest all this money in poverty alleviation and social programs, but what works, and what doesn't. So some of that.
Fascinating. So last question to each of you all. Just before you go to sleep, you switch off the light. And one thing, what's your fear? Like, what do you wish doesn't happen when you switch off the light and about to go to sleep? What's the fear? We
What
have
will
the hope of
happen
India. We have the
the next
future of India.
day?
Sorry.
What will happen the
What
next
will happen
day?
in the next day or in the future? Yeah. And what's the one thing you worry about when you switch off the light?
Not sure I worry about any great philosophical thing if I switch off the light.
Okay, what's the practical thing you worry about if you switch off the light, if it's not philosophical?
That nothing goes wrong with the health of my husband, and that, there's no fire that I can't control in the organization. Basic stuff.
Mirai, what's
That is
your
fine.
fear as you switch off?
Yeah. No, I worry that, will we be able to keep India as we know it, as a plural, democratic society, country, where there's place for everybody, particularly the poorest and the weakest, and those who are forgotten, minorities, Adivasis, Dalits, women. Will we be able to live up to the dreams of Gandhiji and work for Dusri Azadi, the second freedom of our people? Or are we straying from the path? So I worry about that. And my mentor, Ilaben Bhatt, says, this is not the India that we fought for. This is not the India for which people sacrificed so much. And it's sobering. I mean, there's a lot positive going on. So I'm not pessimistic. I'm not hopeless. But I worry. We say that we are the world's largest democracy. Well, each of us has to work hard to make sure that it will always remain so from the bottom up.
And that it stays as noisy as ever as a democracy. Right?
Absolutely, it should. Absolutely. That's a true gauge of success. Thank you very much for your time. I'm going to hand over to Subbu. Subbu has 2 or 3 questions. And then from there, I think Winnie will take over. But thank you very, very much for your time and being on the show. Thank you.
Thank you, Ajit. Good evening, Zia. Good evening, Mirai. I met you all at different times. Zia at her office while doing a corporate deal for my company. And Mirai, we met at a PPI conference in the West Coast.
That's
and
right.
on a plane on the way back. Always very fascinated to hear from you all, interact from you all. Most of the questions were answered by both of you all so very well. So not any specific questions, but I have 2-3 very broad level questions which I would like to ask. Mirai, if I can go with you first on the public health, particularly in the context of this entire pandemic. It has had a huge implication, I guess, on the education system, on women in particular, the migrant laborers who went back. So if you can just tell us a little more as to what can India do to bring them back up to speed, both in terms of education, both in terms of lost opportunities. I think that will be one of the first questions I would like to ask you.
Sure. So, I mean, I think on education already the government is opening up schools in many states. And I think that's positive. I actually think we should have opened up schools a while ago. And the chief scientist of WHO, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, also said so a while ago. I think our children are going to need many more inputs, more hand-holding, and government is going to have to invest more in education to make up for this huge gap. But I'm no expert on education. I mean, my work is more with women's economic empowerment. So what we've been saying to our government is that you need to set up a livelihood recovery fund where all Indians can contribute. Obviously, the government of India should contribute, but others of us, you can make it tax deductible. And from this fund, right down to the local level, we should be able to, support small women's groups, farmers clubs, and so on, who are trying to jumpstart the local economy. Because unless we do that, we're not going to have, all this goes up and adds up to our GDP. We're not going to really be able to recover. The recovery of us all depends on that kind of jump starting of the local economy, I believe. So livelihood recovery fund where working capital is available to cooperatives and women's self-help groups and their federations. Soft loans are available, some grant also. And then, as I've been stressing, the importance of social protection. You can have a livelihood security system, but if you don't have a social protection or social security system, like public health, like childcare, like some basic insurance, pension, then we are not going to be able to jumpstart our economy and support our citizens, fellow citizens.
Thank you. Zia, you made a very interesting observation as to how you would like to understand the younger generation better. So I have a daughter, so each time I speak with her, some new idea comes into my head. She manages to put some new idea into my head, which makes me think about women in a completely different manner than what I used to think to. Very progressive, I can say. So as a parent, what are the advice you would give to the parents today in terms of understanding their children and particularly girl children? And what are the skill sets you are acquiring to ensure that what challenges you are facing in terms of understanding? What are you doing about that?
I think that probably more frequent and more honest conversations without either the parent or the child walking away with preconceived notions, or my parent will never understand me, or I just can't understand the world my child is living in. I think that what has changed today, young men and women are fascinated with social media, spend hours on their own, are okay with less human interaction unless they seek it out. Friendships as important as relatives very often. And, what I would want to do is to keep inculcating, especially in the young woman, a sense of passion for what they want to do. Because I truly believe that if there is no passion, you are the 40% leaky pipeline. You have to really be invested in what you believe in and what you love as a woman to stay the course. There are too many odds stacked up against you. What I would want to do is, as I said earlier, to become a little more broad-minded or open-minded. I think my young 3 daughters continue to see me as a fossilized, narrow-minded, won't change her mind mother. And there's some truth in that, but it's hard for me, I think, and that's where I'm working on myself.
Thank you so much. And one final question to both of you, because this has come from one of the people who are participating in the webinar, is based on what's happening in India in the current phase. Do you regret having come back from abroad? Both of you had studied abroad, had some sort of career opportunities. Is there any regret in that, the fact that you all came back?
None at all.
Not at all. There you go.
Thank you. That's a very
both of
powerful
us
message
and
to
you
our readers.
together.
Thank you.
I don't think that either of us could have had the opportunity to prove ourselves and to make the impact that we hope we can make here in a country which was not our own. That's my sense.
Thank you so
Couldn't
much.
agree with you more. I just feel just so enriched and honored to be back in this country and doing what we can. It's
So
even
can
if
I
it's a
ask,
bit.
if I can ask a kind of follow-up to that, is that the advice to your children, that to stay on in India? Or are you telling your children, take the first flight out and don't come? Or are you saying do what you want to do? Which of the three?
I think it really depends. You go first, Mirai.
No, I was just saying that, follow your heart, follow your passion. As Zia said, I'm with you on that, Zia. I don't think that there's some formula that everyone has to follow. So happens, I don't know about Zia, but it so happens that, from when I was 16 and I had opportunities to study abroad from when I was 16, I was very clear that, I wanted to come back. And I think because the whole issue of poverty bothered me very early. So, it's a very personal journey. So everyone has to be on their own personal journey. I don't think there's some cookie cutter approach here.
I think for women, as a mother, I just would want to do the best by my children. If that meant that they had to go abroad to study, all my 3 children went abroad to America. And of course, your heart is always in your mouth as to whether they'll come back home and take care of you when you are old, or whether they'll, settle abroad. But that's you've taken the first step, then the rest is up to fate, God, and them. But I think you must give them the best opportunity that you can, and the rest then is, luck and fate.
Thank you so much. Vinny, over to you.
Over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, Subbu. Thanks, Ajit. And thank you, Zia and Mirai, for your insights into, what it will take to be future ready, especially for women, and also highlighting how the role of women has evolved and in fact will evolve over the years. In terms of what the next 20 years for the social sector looks like, I think many in the sector are worried that while GDP growth and market cap draw the attention of policymakers, businessmen, entrepreneurs, and in fact, even the media, a lot more needs to be done to boost the sector. Zia, Mirai, you both committed capital, talent, and time to address multiple social issues. And we sincerely thank you for all of that. I think it's essential that we all do our bit and, be the change that we actually wish to see. Now, for over 20 years, Help Your NGO has been working to increase transparency in the social sector, helping donors make informed donations, and more importantly, offering easy solutions to support credible NGOs. We are proud to present to you our latest initiative to encourage individuals to support NGOs, the HYNGO band. I think Ajit, Subbu, and I are wearing it. So basically, we've launched our Did You HYNGO challenge today on social media with Ronnie Screwwala. And I'm going to quickly share my screen to just browse you through what our objective is. So basically, to support our effort, all you have to do is head over to the link shared in the chat box and purchase this HYNGO band, which will be packaged in a multi-purpose khadi pouch just for 200 rupees. By purchasing the HYNGO band, you will actually be contributing to the corpus we are building to support credible and vetted NGOs working towards the UN SDGs. Now, let's move on to how you can participate in our challenge. It's extremely simple. Click a photo of you wearing the band, post it on social media with the hashtag #DidYouHyngo, and tag 3 or more friends to take on the challenge. Now, for us to be future ready, we need to HYNGO. So the question really is, did you HYNGO today? Because I did. With this, we conclude the second session of our evening. And thank you once again, Zia, Mirai, for sparing the time to speak with us and sharing valuable insights. Thank you, Ajit, for moderating the session, and Subbu for the Q&A round. Thank you to all the participants for attending, and special thanks to Quantum, for assisting us in hosting this webinar.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.